We are properly in the final stretch before Fallout 76's Wastelanders DLC drops, and as such, we have a ton of new information, news, and just all-around details coming in. We just got a ton of new stuff from Bethesda. They actually did something really cool and had just a few developers playing the game, riffing, giving their thoughts about what they were seeing, which is some totally new gameplay of things we've just never seen before. But it is nice to get that different perspective. Not the marketing team, but the development team. Even further, we got a good chunk of new gameplay actually from IGN provided by Bethesda. I feel like not too many people noticed this, and it is quite revealing. Just today alone, we got like a good 6 minutes or so of brand new Wastelanders gameplay. Outside of that, we got some new details about certain things. There's some larger things happening with the game right now, particularly in relation to Steam. So we're going to discuss all of it in this video, including breakdowns of this new gameplay. If you guys enjoy the content or just want to watch Wastelanders, I'm going to have a full spread of coverage in the coming weeks. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a video going over everything we know, all this new information tied together with all of the old information, but also just live streams and my actual review, first impressions, and gameplay of all the new stuff. And just one final shout out for myself. For the weekend leading up to Wastelanders, I'm going to do a 15% off sale on all the existing stuff on my merch store. So if you want to support the channel or just want to buy a shirt, you can get 15% off with the code WASTE. So firstly, let's take a look at the new details directly from Bethesda. They posted up their weekly Inside the Vault article, and in that, they actually have something pretty cool with these dev dives. They're 3 separate videos that are relatively short, but just looking at one specific aspect of Wastelanders, and I love this. I hope this continues with just future updates in general, not a Wastelanders exclusive. The first one we see takes us to the Crash Space Station, where we get a lot of very interesting information. First off, they just mentioned that at the release of Fallout 76, they wanted to do something more significant here, but couldn't find the time and space or something that was significant enough to mark this location, which right now in game, the Crash Space Station is this epic looking place that was just totally underutilized and didn't really have much of anything going on. But fortunately now, as you can see in this new Wastelanders gameplay, there is a lot more going on. It just looks really cool. There's not too much to break down from the actual shots of the Crash Space Station. I think it's just cool to take it in. I feel like a lot of us have seen this, have played through this in Fallout 76. I know it was one of the first places in the game overall I wanted to check out. But what is also happening in this gameplay is particularly interesting. What we see are 2 daily quests that you can do for the Raiders, and it seems like these will be the 2 daily quests for the Raiders. So you can either do a quest for Ren, who we actually get a glimpse at here, a little bit of the dialogue from her. The voice acting thus far has been pretty top-notch, but that's typical for Bethesda. And this daily for Ren basically involves getting a few miscellaneous items. During this segment, it's radio vacuum cubes, but I wouldn't be shocked if maybe the location changes somewhat, like there's 5 locations to pick from with a few different objects at each one, and in large part seems immensely simple, with the other quest being to deal with former Crater gang members. But then after you complete one of these daily quests, your faction reputation will increase. In the past, we've seen a look at some of the different milestones for faction reputation, and even further, they describe in this video that at different levels of your faction reputation, you'll unlock different things you could purchase at vendors, with the yummiest stuff being at the highest level of reputation. And although it does definitely look like you are getting quite a bit of reputation from this daily quest, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. I'm going to predict that even though there are 2 dailies available at Crater, you'll only actually be able to do one of these per day. There's several things like this in Fallout 76 right now. You have 3 different options, but you can only complete one of those options per day, and then you could reset it every day. And although this does look fairly meaty, perhaps it gets increasingly difficult, requiring more and more faction experience to get to those higher tier levels. We don't know that for a fact, but I have a big question around how much of a grind will this be? There'll likely be other ways to increase your faction reputation. You play through the main quest for the Raiders, you side with them, you just do other miscellaneous things in favor of them, and then maybe you get to this point. Now, how long is it going to take you to grind out these dailies to get from that point to this point? Because we know at this point, that's where you get the yummy stuff. You can only do this quest once a day, so are we talking in a week? Are we talking a month? And then of course, this is just for the Raiders. You'll probably have the exact same system for the Settlers, and if you don't side with that faction, you might start off at even a lower point after the main quest with them, requiring more grind to get to the highest tier because you're starting at a deficit. Either way, it's all going to be very, very interesting to see. Outside of that, next thing that is pretty related, we do have the new items and gold bullion system. So Bethesda shows gameplay here that I think is a spoiler based on my limited knowledge of the game. It's not necessarily an overt spoiler, but I could see some people not wanting to see this. So I'm going to talk about this gameplay system without showing the gameplay, and then I'll show the gameplay after and with a spoiler warning and a skip time. So we've heard about gold bullions in the past, and seemingly this will be another new currency that you can get with Wastelanders. And it's effectively described how gold bullions will be the end game currency to unlock some of the plans for some of these very valuable late game items. And one such one we see here are some of the past rewards for those Vault 94 raid items. The Vault 94 raids are getting shut down, so they're getting moved to this. There's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack from even just this small gameplay segment. So with this, I feel like they're oddly vague. They introduced this as an endgame system. It's how you're going to get some of those top tier late game items, but they don't tell us A, how you actually get bullion, or B, really how much a bullion is worth. We see 1500 in the dev's inventory. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that's probably the cap, at least based on the pricing. Like with legendary script, you can only have a certain amount of legendary script in your inventory at any given time. I can only claim so much in a day. I'm going to guess the gold bullion system will mirror that. So you could have 1500 gold bullions total, but then get, what, 200-300 per day if it's similar to legendary script. Now, how exactly you get these, I have no idea. Maybe just doing Wastelanders events, doing Wastelanders quests. I'm sure it'll be integrated into some of the other events and quests, since this will be kind of a repeatable endgame phase, something you're going to want to grind out. So maybe just legendary enemies might drop gold bullion sometimes. But regardless, these will likely be multiple day items. To actually get all of them will probably take a good few days, or perhaps just weeks of grind or waiting. Now, for a lot of them, you don't need everything. Like, you just buy the Gauss pistol, then a couple of your favorite mods, and you're probably set. But this is interesting because it's taking a gameplay feature and putting it behind not like a real money paywall, but an in-game currency paywall. In Vanilla Vault 76, you find a weapon on an enemy, you scrap the weapon, and that's how you actually learn the mod plans, how to craft various modifications for that weapon. But clearly here, like with the Gauss pistol, several of the key mods are locked behind the gold bullion system. Now, you'll probably still be able to find Gauss pistols on just random enemies, but you're going to be way more limited in what you could do with them. It'll just kind of be that Gauss pistol as it exists, and you can't necessarily upgrade it as completely. But this is also super interesting when you combine it with the faction reputation system. On this page, all we see for the Gauss line of weapons is the Gauss pistol, and we see the known plan, so it just seems like this vendor doesn't sell Gauss weapons. I'm kind of extrapolating that. I'm going to guess some of the other vendors, maybe like one of the faction vendors, sells the other two Gauss weapons. So in effect, what this creates are several things that you could grind out towards the later part of the game to get some of these higher tier rewards. If you want to have all three Gauss weapons, I wouldn't be shocked if you have to reach a certain point with the settlers, raiders, and then have a certain amount of gold bullions. And the big question around this will be, how does it actually impact legendary spawns? Because just having a regular Gauss pistol will be like this. It does next to nothing towards the later part of the game. You need a legendary variant. Something Bethesda has done with DLC items is make it so, at least at the legendary purveyor, to actually get it to drop from the legendary purveyor, you need to know the plan. How are you going to get the plan for these cool new high tier weapons? You're going to have to either get gold bullions or increase your faction reputation. And then I also am curious, will it still spawn on regular legendary enemies? Do you have to know the plan to get a legendary ghoul to drop a Gauss pistol? So I know that whole segment probably seemed really long, but I think this is going to be the end game changes with Wastelanders. It's going to be involved or have to do with actually grinding out certain things. Now, you're not only grinding for legendaries, you're also grinding out for bullions to then grind for these legendaries once you know the plan for them. Or you're going to be doing some of those repeatable faction quests to get the top tier items that you could buy from those vendors. So now, as far as the spoiler part of this video that I felt the need to blur out, if you don't want to see this, and I think if you're trying to go into Wastelanders blind, definitely don't watch this part. You could skip to the timestamp at the top if you don't really care, or if you don't think it's a big spoiler. I mean, clearly Bethesda put it out publicly, so it can't be that big. But basically in this, what it looks like we see is the inside of Vault 79. The inside of Vault 79 that's filled with gold. And just based off the overall aesthetic of these guys and everything else we know about Wastelanders, this is probably the Secret Service. We are trading gold with the Secret Service in Vault 79 to actually get some high tier weapons. I think one of the reasons they don't scroll down any further on this list is because later on this list is the Secret Service power armor and Secret Service armor / jetpack, but this does seem to confirm a few things. One, that once you actually break into Vault 79, 79, you will find, yes, it actually is full of treasure, but then maybe you can't actually get that treasure because the Secret Service is inside. And based on the fact that this vendor and the gold bullion system is described as being a late game system, I have to imagine it's fairly late in the main story. It would be weird to gain access to Vault 79 with this specific vendor and then it be early in the story. So for that reason, to me, it did kind of seem like a fairly major spoiler. But then in the final dev dive, we get some gameplay of the Wendigo Colossus, which I was starting to get concerned for because we hadn't seen this guy since E3 2019. And well, this just gets me immensely hyped for this DLC. It looks like it delivers on multiple fronts. So firstly, the enemy itself looks really cool. It has a few different attacks. It'll likely have some kind of melee stomping attack. It's hard to tell if that's happening here, but also a spitting attack where it'll fire a projectile at you after kind of loading up on it. The ability to call in other Wendigo to help out, but also the most interesting, this fear attack, where if you are in this radius, you could almost see it represented there, you'll be feared and unable to fight back and seemingly unable to control the direction you move for a certain amount of time. And that looks awesome. That'll actually probably make this a more challenging foe. The Scorch Beast Queen is hard because it could fly away and you have to shoot it in the air. But if you had to fight like 2 Wendigo Colossuses and you had this constant fear issue, it might, 1, get really frustrating, but 2, make this more of a genuine challenge. And at least from a gameplay perspective, this boss level enemy is far more interesting than some of the other options. Overall, it just looks awesome. And also, it's a really high level. Level 110 is one of the highest level enemies we've seen in the game, so it's cool to see this is actually delivering. It seems like it'll genuinely be a tough fight when you encounter one. Although that would be the one question that we don't really get an answer to with this. When or how do you encounter it? Is this just a random encounter, or is there a way to actually make it spawn and have a ton of people gather around to fight it? Although something else really cool that Bethesda is doing with Wastelanders is actually giving veteran players a unique outfit. This is the outfit itself, and basically if you play Fallout 76 between the launch on November 14th to Wastelanders release, you'll get this. Now, it's definitely not the coolest outfit in the world, but as far as outfits go that are free, this is on the cooler side of what Bethesda has released and definitely a solid addition. I like that they're doing this. A lot of other online games have, and I've been wanting Bethesda to do something like this for a while, so it's cool to see it finally happening. As far as how you can get this, you don't have to do anything, just play the game. Something else pretty cool Bethesda reveals with this is a map of locations that will no longer be eligible for a camp spawn. So if you're not familiar, in Fallout 76, the way this will work is you can't have your camp next to a significant location. So what this means is all of these are probably made a bit more significant with Wastelanders. So someone, potentially me, could spend a ton of time breaking down what all of these mean, what each location could be. That would probably take like 3, 4, 5 hours, and the DLC is only a few days away. I'm not doing that, but a few of the big ones that stand out. 1, the Palace of the Winding Path gets a big block off zone. Right now in game, it's an interesting location visually. It has an event there, but otherwise kind of mundane. Although it's fairly close to the raider base of Crater. And before the Scorch Plague wiped everyone out, we know that the Raiders actually held this as a settlement for a brief stint in Fallout 76 lore. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's a nice big raider base that just looks really cool. Some of these definitely look like they are just flat out new locations. There's not really a ton going on there to begin with. In one of the earlier dev dives, Bethesda actually described how there's going to be roughly 40 new locations with Wastelanders. They didn't expand on that too much. I don't know if that also includes edited locations, but they do mention that for several of the locations, they get big overhauls, particularly with the Cult of the Mothman stuff. So I bet that's a lot of what we're seeing here. Some new places, and actually by the looks of it, quite a few new places, but also just a lot of locations getting overhauls or revamps. And this map gives you a good idea of just how different Appalachia will be after Wastelanders comes out. So perhaps going to some of these places, taking before pictures, so you could take cool after pictures in a week, could be a nice idea. And then one final thing in the Inside the Vault, there is a current Purveyor mystery pick event. So basically you spend a certain amount of script, you get a random item, you get a discount on legendary weapons. I would advise not doing this. Based off everything we've seen thus far with Wastelanders, I think script will be relevant. I think these legendary modules will be relevant, probably with crafting some of the new weapons, similar to how you had to use it to craft the Vault 94 armor. And just in general, you'll probably want to spend your legendary script trying to get some of the new weapons that come with Wastelanders after you get those plans. So I would resist the urge and just save it for another week until Wastelanders comes out. Although Although, then we have this other new gameplay, totally separate from all of that, but in my eyes, almost some of the coolest stuff we've seen and revealing quite a bit, similar to yesterday's trailer. It's currently from an IGN video. Basically, Bethesda gave IGN some preview footage. Several media outlets got a preview access to the build, including IGN. They couldn't record stuff, but now, a few days after their NDAs lifted, Bethesda also gave them some footage that they could use. So in this video, basically the person who made the write-up for IGN on his first impressions of Wastelanders is expanding on some of his ideas and just kind of talking about his overall impressions over top the new gameplay. I'm not going to talk about anything he verbally says. It is, again, worth a watch though, or really just worth a listen. But as far as this new gameplay, again, via IGN, via Bethesda. In some of the first scenes, we see combat against a new type of character known as the Free Radicals, which are interesting, but we'll talk more about them in a moment. During this gameplay, we get a few new reveals as far as items. We first see a time bomb, or what looks like a time bomb from New Vegas, although here it's clearly a throwable, like a grenade that's bigger. But New Vegas, it was actually a mine, so same concept, but different execution. Although it also seems we get the tried and true dynamite. It's kind of hard to see, but we get a few shots of it throughout the gameplay and it's unmistakable. It looks very much so like dynamite. We get some just general gameplay showing off some of the new weapons. They both look really cool, but it does raise some questions for me as to how he got them. The fact that he's fighting low-level characters, or Bethesda is fighting low-level characters, but using these brand new weapons makes me feel like they probably can just be gotten from certain enemies. But if you want the customizable or legendary types, then you have to unlock the plans. This part is immensely interesting. We find Heather Ellis, seemingly someone who is in a responder's outfit, at the past responder's base. This is really interesting because it would seem to indicate the responders are making a return somewhat, but I don't think that's the case. One, because I know it's not the case, but two, with this dialogue line, what's with the responder's outfit? I'm sure this goes down a dialogue tree of, oh, well, I found it, or oh, I'm trying to start the responders back up again. Based on all the other information, it doesn't seem like the responders play a major role, and I just don't want people to see this, get really excited, and then disappointed when it's not like a major faction return. This part's interesting because we're at a Free Radical base, seemingly, but of course this raises some broader questions about the Free Radicals, aka what are they? We go from fighting them to having them be passive at their home base. We see in the dialogue a couple of interesting things that I think are revealing. One, we somehow know the password, but you could also know the password with a skill check. The fact that we just have it as a regular speech option, I think that means that we talked to somebody that gave us the password, or we found a note or something by sneaking around the base, which leads me to the conclusion that this is a quest. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it's one of the first quests you do for the Wayward. The first quest for Duchess involves you going to this base to handle some people. I played it back at PAX East. I think this is the base and this is the people. Although I don't know how the Free Radicals fit into the larger sphere of Wastelanders. They look like raiders. They even have some raider logos at some of their bases, but they seemingly aren't. Maybe it's a subdivision of the raiders. Maybe they're enemies to the raiders or a lesser faction that's only a part of the early game. And throughout the rest of this gameplay, it just basically looks like we're taking down enemies in this base, going through the Free Radicals, eventually taking down the bosses of the Free Radicals, which again was that quest objective. Although he actually shoots somebody with an arrow and then you can loot the arrow from that body, which is a nice feature. I'm happy Bethesda actually added that. Again, I'll have a full link to this down below. It is some very interesting gameplay. There's some old gameplay intermingled. I'm showing you most of it in the background, but the video overall and the thoughts of the person behind it are pretty cool. Although that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. Hopefully you guys found this video informative. There was a lot of information all throughout it. We're only a few days away now. I'm going to have a lot of Wastelanders content, so if you like this video, want to see more, you can subscribe. Otherwise, I thank you all for watching again, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.